Thank you for joining us. I'm Gord Long. It's my pleasure to have with me Mish Shedlock. Mish is of Sitka Pacific Capital, but probably better known for his website, well-followed website, mishtalk.com. Welcome back, Mish.
Pleasure to be on the show, Gordon.
Well, we missed last month. You were out taking pictures somewhere, as I recall.
Yeah, I was in Monument Valley, actually, doing some panoramas for the first time, some night photography pretty much for the first time. Got a couple night images before that had come out pretty good. That was the focus of this last trip. But we had clouds at night on almost all the nights. Makes for pretty tough shooting night skies. But anyway, had lots of fun.
Jumping into what we want to talk about today, Mish, you just put up a post here on your forecast, but maybe we could start with the Fed this week, what it meant to you, and then what you think the forecast really is.
Sure. The Fed hiked as expected. I mean, it was not real. Expected is the wrong word. Given is the correct word. The 99% probability that they would hike. The Fed's not going to buck that ever. The Fed might shock with a cut, but the Fed doesn't shock with hikes or excess hikes. So they hiked a quarter of a point. The interesting thing to me is what they said and didn't say. The economic reports lately have actually been pretty miserable, and they continued today in a major way with housing, and we'll get to that in just a bit. But the Fed has been talking about all this weakness being transitory. It is just transitory. So I expected the Fed to use the word transitory somewhere yesterday, either in the actual minutes or in the post FOMC Q&A follow-up. And they didn't. They said things were balanced, and they said things were moderate. The risks were balanced. They expected to see a moderate improvement in a whole bunch of different areas. They used the word moderate 3 times, transitory 0. So moderate is the new buzzword, I guess. But looking at the data, Gordon, I don't see it. I don't see where they come up with these GDP forecasts, or the economy is improving moderately kind of forecasts, because it isn't.
I spent a lot of time at this, and we over at Matt SII, that's garbage. It just is not happening. We're watching the credit cycle, I think, frankly, in a nosedive, not only globally with the credit impulse, but also in lending to the automotive industry, commercial and industrial loans, et cetera. So, and that's all, and the yield curve, everything's screaming that growth is not there that they think it is, but we'll see.
Yeah, the Fed's hiked here.
They're leaning right into a punch, in our opinion.
Well, the Fed's hiked, but long-term interest rates have been going like this ever since the Fed started hiking. So I looked at the last 2 recessions, and the Fed was hiking. The curve got narrower and narrower in this upward wedge-forming pattern until it inverted. We're seeing something completely different this time. Certainly the the short end is wedging higher, but the long end is coming down.
Fast. So that's the issue. It's the long end.
Coming down pretty fast.
The 230 spread is the issue.
So we're still nowhere near close to inversion, and if we invert, it's probably going to be like sudden, and it's going to mean the recession started. An inversion is not a requirement for a recession, but it is typically a sufficient condition for one. But with interest rates at 0 for so long, I never expected a reversion before the next recession hit. Now we've actually got a tiny little bit of room here for one, with the short end near 1 point, 1 to 1 1/4. So I guess the 2-year could invert with that. The but right now the market is still believing the Fed somewhat, not on the same basis that the Fed's going to keep hiking. So,
Mish, for what it's worth, we were all a group us all focused on the FOMC, but we couldn't. No, nobody cared about the rates. That was a given. And actually, what Yellen said, we were totally focused on the normalization of the balance sheet, what she would say, and the rate that she would initially indicate that she would start potentially not stop buying on a rolled over basis, and it was pretty moderate in actual fact.
well, yeah, well, supposedly they're going to start in December, if you believe that. And how long will it take? I did an analysis of that, and we're talking about 10 years. That's if they do what they said they're going to do every month. Like there's going to be no recessions in the next 10 years, and they're going to keep doing this, as opposed to going in reverse and actually adding to the balance sheet. So I don't believe it. It's ludicrous to talk about. I don't know how anyone can believe it, but people react as if this comment makes some sense.
The Bank of Japan, ECB, and Fed all now have balance sheets equal at a total value of $4.5 trillion. The Fed's actually slightly behind in that. And this time last year, we were printing, not we, the other central banks, exclusion of the United States, was 200 billion. Last fall, we were already starting to come up in our first quarter 260 billion a month from 200 billion. And as of this month, last month rather, we're at 300 billion a month that the central banks altogether, including the US, which is apparently zero. And if you believe Bernanke's enrich thy neighbor, ring around the rosy, it's time for the United States to step up and increase the balance sheet. So, and by the way, if you're printing 300 billion a month, are putting that liquidity, and you don't stop that, right? Without tremendous problems. And Mish, and the reason we think they're doing it is because globally the credit market is absolutely turning. Trade is slowing at such a rate. It's not about the U.S. economy. They're concerned about a slowing global economy. I don't know if you see that or believe that.
Well, I believe this global economy is slowing. Whether or not they see anything at all is debatable. They're on their schedule. They believe what they want to believe. If they want to hike, they're going to come up with a reason to do it. That's what this last meeting was about. And people misinterpreted my comments on this. So, Mish, you sound like you don't think they should be hiking. And my reply was, well, I don't know what they should do, and they don't know what they should do either. Only the free market knows what's needed to be done. I put a quiz out there, and it was, should the Fed have hiked? And my answers were, hell yes, hell no, hell I don't know, and something else. Only 3% of the people got the something else part correct. Over half, slightly over half, said hell no, and then about 26% or so said hell no, and another quarter of the people said I don't know, which is actually a reasonable response because no one really knows where interest rates should be. Now, certainly if they were zero still, we could make this determination. What would the free market determine here now? I don't know, but a free market wouldn't have the Fed. It wouldn't have negative interest rates. It wouldn't have so many of these other things. The Fed and central banks have so distorted the economy, there is no pricing mechanism at all. No one really knows where interest rates would really be. I don't pretend to know. The Fed does pretend to know, and they've blown 3 asset bubbles in succession by pretending they know what they're doing.
And this is the biggest measured in any number of ways, this bubble.
I believe it is. It's many people have, I don't know who came up with the term, Hussman used it. I don't think he was first. Maybe someone else beat him to it. It doesn't matter. But this is being labeled the everything bubble, and that's pretty much what it is. You know, Bitcoin is soaring to 3,000. You know, bear in mind, you could have got a number of, not that long ago, 2012 or something, for a buck or $10 or something. And when it initially came out, you could have got it for 15 cents. Now it soars to close to 3,000, and Kramer comes out and explaining why it can go to $1 million. And his reason had to do with the Bitcoin ransomers, you know, demanding payment in Bitcoin. Please, you know, that's just crazy talk. Let's just look at the hard data here for a second. I think today's housing report was really icing on the cake for the idea that there's going to be a second quarter recovery. Actually, it's un-icing on the cake. It's icing on the cake that says it's not going to happen. Housing starts were down 5.5% today. Last month was revised lower. They only went up about once this year, I believe. And these housing starts roll over. You know, they start a house, and they need construction supplies, they need carpet, they need this, they need that, they need appliances to put in there. All this stuff, you know, filters through down to when the home is finally complete and the buyer moves in. You know, he starts painting and buying furniture and doing all kinds of things, yard work, adding trees to the yard, flowers in the garden, that kind of thing. Housing starts were absolutely miserable. And yet, despite that, GDP now, I mean, it came out with its forecast today and is still expecting residential construction to add to second quarter GDP. Gordon, I don't see it. I don't see how. I don't see how it can't be something like, you know, negative 0.3% to negative 0.5%. Now let's talk about retail spending, consumer spending. GDP now, at the start of the quarter, on May 1st, it had GDP at 4.3%. It's now down to 2.9. Okay, 1.4 percentage point drop. But it had personal consumption expenditures at 2.2%. Guess where they are now? 2.19%. This is despite auto sales crashing. This is despite a second poor retail report came out. The last two retail reports, if you average them, actually one of them was pretty good. The last one was pretty much a disaster. If you add them, we are talking 0.5% a month. Okay, let's annualize that. That's well, 1% over 2 months annualized is about 0.6%. So with retail spending up about 0.6%, I don't know how you got personal consumption expenditures up 2.2%. I don't see it. I don't know where these numbers come from. And then change in private inventories. GDP now, estimated today, change in private inventories would add 0.75% to GDP, second quarter GDP. Now, it started the quarter, let me see if I can read my number here, it started the quarter at 1%. So we've dropped a quarter of a percentage point here off of that number. But we've had one report come out, just one, and it shows that business inventories are down 0.2%. Well, business inventory is down 0.2%. How do you get 0.75% rise? Now, we only have 1 month of data, but we also have partial data on wholesale trade numbers, and they were down 0.4%, 0.5%. So we've got like a month and a half in here. I don't know how we get out of this a rise of 0.75% based off of inventories.
Well, let me translate it, Mish, into real world from economics to trade stocks. Of 8 strategic investment initiatives or insights that we focus on, 2 of them, one is the retail industry and specifically retail apparel. The second is the automotive reversal in cycle. And those two, the profits in the last 4 months have been stunning. Absolutely stunning. We're talking about the malls in trouble, department stores in troubles, all the chains associated with retail. We're talking about Hertz in trouble, Avis in trouble because of residual values in automotive. I just keep going on. In real estate investment trusts associated with retail, 23 of our REITs down an average of 36%. And these are all short. So I'm trying to say the real world data of profits, and it's collapsing. I mean, we haven't seen this kind of stunning collapse in a long time in any kind of industry. So I don't know how the GDP and consumer consumption can actually support it. The consumer has stopped.
I mean, auto sales alone are 20% of retail sales, and they've been terrible. Down 4 and 5%. So that's a huge component. I think I'm being generous, actually. My estimate when I said consumer spending is going to add 1% to 1.5%. So I came out with a range. GDP Now's forecast was 2.9. Well, we only have half the data in, and we don't know what's going to happen. But based on the data that I've seen, I'm estimating GDP at 0.1% to maybe 1.1%. And my inkling is under 1%. And if the data gets worse, we're looking potentially at negative numbers here.
Yeah, we don't use the word, but we think there's a recession imminent, and that we say that for not only what I just said, but the credit. The credit is contracting. You can just see it. Delinquencies, foreclosures, not foreclosures, well, forbearance in student loan cases, defaults, everything.
Repossessions of autos.
And residual values of autos is the big issue because a third of them are all leased now. The amount that are coming back on lease, the pressures it's now putting on the rebates. Rebates are at the highest they've had in years. Cutbacks in the auto. So a lot of supporting facts there for you, Mish. Any other comments? I want to shift gears if we could. Any other points on GDP?
No, that's it. I mean, these are preliminary numbers. We don't have the data. The revisions can be massive either way. So these kinds of predictions can make people look kind of silly. But I've pretty much nailed the last two quarters on GDP. It's the first time I've tried this early, looking at the numbers. But I'm just looking at 3 different categories: residential construction, inventories, and consumer spending. And none of them look any good.
Now, being on kind of a negative note here, can we talk about the state of Illinois? You've put out a couple missives that are just stunning. One, once again, for third year, the state does not have a budget. You've got, again, them not paying contractors. I think we've been through this before in the state of Illinois. And now we got issues with Powerball and Mega Money, whether they were going to participate. How serious is it?
Yeah, this is kind of interesting because I got to break this story, and it's actually rare for me to break anything. But someone in the construction industry, I believe, or actually sent me the notice that went out telling the construction workers, effective July 1st, unless there's a budget, all work halts. And so this is kind of one of those things. Are you sure? I got it from a reliable source, so I ran with it. And it wasn't until the next day that mainstream media, was commenting on that. So that was fun for me. But they did this before. They did this last July, and they've also paid off lottery winners before, even though in violation of the law, without a budget. So the laws that they've passed says there's very few things that they can pay, actually, until there's a budget resolution. And I bet you can guess one of them. They can pay themselves. They can't pay contractors. They can't pay people doing real work, but the legislators get paid. So as long as they can get paid, Budget crisis? Who cares?
I was going to say pensions. Are they paying the pension payments every month?
No, they're not making pension payments. I don't know, maybe they're making some small, maybe they can pay them. But Illinois has, 14.6, 14 point something in unpaid bills. And so the lottery, is to tie into the lottery, what happens is the state has to issue the winners of the lotteries an IOU. Finally, Mega Ball and Powerball, Mega Millions and Powerball said, enough of this. We're pulling out. Also July 1st, or as of the June 30 lottery, something like that. Because they're not able to pay winners because the state's not paying them.
Illinois has a habit of solving these problems by just jacking up the taxes. Is that coming again?
That's the latest budget compromise. There's no compromise. That's the latest budget. I want Ronner to hold out until the Democrats agree to some real reform. My guess right now is this not going to happen. They're going to pass another round of tax hikes. And what House Speaker Madigan has said is pass tax hikes, and then we'll talk about reform. There won't be Illinois. There will not be reform, Gordon, unless it's done before or simultaneous with tax hikes.
Your property taxes are getting to be through the roof in the greater Chicago area. The best I can tell, there's your sales taxes right up there in the top echelon. I mean, where else? People are going to start, it's going to be like California, they're going to start leaving.
Well, this not start leaving. Illinois has lost population. It's I believe the only state that's actually lost population for as long as it has. It's the only state whose wages have gone down since the Great Recession. It's businesses are leaving. Corporate tax revenues declined. I got this right, 41%. I think in the last report, people and businesses are voting with their feet, and I'm going to be one of them. I'm going to be out of here. One of the proposals that's flying around in the Senate.
For you personally, is it property tax that's the most annoying?
Property tax is really annoying. I've on a $400,000 or $500,000 house. I don't know what this would sell for. My property taxes are close to $15,000. $15,000. I've got a neighbor who's trying to sell a house. He's got one of the more expensive houses in this subdivision. He's selling. Hard time selling when you got the most expensive house with property taxes in Illinois being what they are.
I have friends in California, in Berkeley area, other friends in New Jersey, and their property taxes are in the 21 to 27,000 a year, and they're comparable priced houses to what yours is in that kind of range. And what's happening is we're pushing. The Federal Reserve federal government's cutting back money to the states cutting it back to the local, and the only thing left is property taxes. And I think it's a strategy. So now everybody has a McMansion. Prices are up. Now it's time to tax the houses. I just see it coming.
Did you see Lawrence Yunn's, the chief economist for the National Association of Realtors, comment today? He's befuddled why people aren't buying houses. He talks about the demand for housing, and he says there's going to be a housing crisis because home builders aren't keeping up with the demand for houses.
Mish, they should come and get in my car and drive around the ring road around Boston. Every exit, right next building to us, 600 new apartments. There must be 50 of these different developments that are all 600 kind of apartments. The millennials are forced into apartments. And are you ready for this, Mish? 25% of them have to be subsidized to housing, which means they're reduced and priced based on what the state then allocates to them, 25%. So the millennials are not buying houses.
There's no demand for houses or demand for houses. Home builders, we build them. I mean, there's a demand for houses at under the market value. There's which is what, Lawrence Young doesn't get. I said, how can economists be this stupid? Really? To be befuddled by the lack of home sales when prices are through the frickin' roof. No one can afford to buy these damn things. Millennials who may want a house can't afford to buy one. It's as simple as that. And he's befuddled over lack of building in the alleged face of rising demand. Amazing. This is what constitutes economics these days.
He needs to get in a car and drive around, and it will take him about 40 minutes to see what's really happening. It's that big and that obvious, at least in the greater Boston area. It's clear. Mish, we're getting towards the end here, but I want to touch on something that confuses an awful lot of people. You had a great article out explaining it, is bank reserves, the excess bank reserves that are held at the Federal Reserve. They're paying interest on them. What does all that mean? Is that in fact curtailing the amount of stimulus or lending that could be out there?
Let's just historically go back. Excess reserves were almost like non-existent before the Fed started QE. After 3 rounds of QE, excess reserves built to 2.4, 2.6 trillion, something like that. They're now down to 2.1 trillion. I got an email from someone the other day who told me, I don't know how things work, that he didn't use the word hoarding, but that's what applied. He said the demand to hold cash from banks is really high. That's in essence, he's saying that banks are hoarding cash. And why are they doing it? This economist told me that banks were doing this because the Fed was paying interest on reserves. And that's not the way the system works. Reserves have almost nothing to do with the willingness of banks to make loans. That's what the Bank of International Settlement, that's what the Biz said, that's what Steve Keen says, that's what I say. Actually, that's what common sense says, if you can even actually look at the data itself. He proposed that if we stopped paying interest on reserves, that banks would start lending these excess reserves, and they would slowly dwindle down to zero. At the rate at which excess reserves are declining, I estimated we would need 50 trillion in new loans to get the excess reserves down to zero. Now, we can go over these numbers, whether it's 20 trillion or 100 trillion or even 10 trillion, which would be doubling bank credit, by the way, or nearly doubling it. So the idea is nonsensical. And then I also went and posted a chart, and it showed that despite the Fed hiking rates, they've hiked, 4 times now, right? The banks are still lending. So it hasn't curtailed lending any bit. Why? Because excess reserves have nothing to do with banks' willingness to lend. Banks lend when they're not, as long as they're not capital impaired, as long as they've got a creditworthy borrower or someone they deem creditworthy that's willing to borrow. So rather than there being this huge demand for money, as this economist told me, there's actually no demand for loans. Bernanke created all of these excess reserves, deflating interest rates, and despite of very low interest rates, businesses still don't want to borrow. That's what's going on. He has it ass backwards, and he's telling me I don't know what I'm talking about. It's right there in pictures.
Yeah, demand for loans is without question falling. And the other thing, and I talked to enough of them to say, there's not enough collateral out there that's not impaired, problematic, or over leveraged.
We certainly saw that in Spain, didn't we?
Exactly the same thing. Everybody is so over leveraged that you can't create lending unless somebody's got some collateral, and that's one of the central issues right now. And we'll see. Mish, we got a break. Any closing comments you'd like to make?
No, I think that's it. We've covered it all. If the numbers stick as we're on track for here, we're in for some pretty shockingly low GDP numbers as I see it for second quarter.
People can follow your writings, 5 or 6 posts a day at mishtalk.com, but they can follow your photography work at what's the name of the site?
Mishmoments.com. I've got some really cool stuff out there on Iceland first, and now I've got some stuff. I've started a series on Zion National Park. I may do Death Valley next, actually. So I'm just taking people all around rather than posting one random picture, from here or there. I'm giving people an in-depth look at these various parks or various countries, what they can do, what they can see. It's a lot of fun.
Talk to you again next month.
We'll catch you in a month.
Talk to you then. Thanks, Mish.